Imagine a professional sitting in a studio, surrounded by the physical artifacts of a career spanning 2 decades. This is the traditional designer, a person who has spent 20 years mastering the subtle nuances of typography, the complex physics of light in digital spaces, and the delicate balance of color theory. For this creator, every project began with the same intimidating and sacred challenge: the blank canvas. It was a space where human ingenuity met technical discipline. Today, this master of the craft is now being outperformed by a single line of text entered into a blinking cursor. In less than 10 seconds, an algorithm produces a visual asset that is not only competent, but often breathtaking. This is no longer the premise of a science fiction novel, it is the current high-velocity reality of the design industry. The blank canvas is officially dead. We have moved past the era of experimental digital hallucinations into the age of the industrial-grade engine. Generative AI, led by powerful models like Midjourney and DALL-E 3, has transitioned from being a curious toy for early adopters into a suite of tools capable of producing production-ready work. This shift is being defined by a handful of major players who are rewriting the rules of engagement. There is Adobe, the establishment, an industry giant that has spent decades defining the professional workflow. By integrating its Firefly AI into legacy software like Photoshop, Adobe is attempting to bridge the gap between traditional skill sets and the automated future. On the other side of the spectrum is Canva, the democratizer. By making high-level design accessible through its Magic Studio, Canva is stripping away the technical barriers that once separated the amateur from the professional. And then there is Midjourney, the disruptor, a tool that has bypassed traditional interfaces entirely to focus on pure, unadulterated aesthetic power. This revolution is not confined to a single niche. It is saturating every digital space we inhabit. From the rapid-fire production of social media marketing materials to the foundational architecture of high-end UI/UX design and even the conceptual stages of Hollywood blockbuster films, the influence of the machine is undeniable. But why is this happening with such force right now? The answer lies in the convergence of massive, unprecedented computing power and the democratization of taste. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We are witnessing a moment where the technical ability to execute a design is being separated from the intellectual ability to imagine one. The massive datasets used to train these models have distilled the collective aesthetic history of humanity into a searchable generative database. This is the dawn of the synthetic age. However, beneath the cinematic beauty of these AI-generated images lies a jarring and uncomfortable economic reality. Recent statistics regarding the freelance sector suggest a significant displacement of entry-level roles. As the 10x designer emerges, a single individual who can leverage AI to do the work of an entire department, the traditional career path for junior designers is being eroded. The grunt work that once served as the training ground for the next generation is now being handled by algorithms in seconds. This is the narrative promise of our current era. The word designer is being redefined before our eyes, shifting from a role defined by technical execution to one defined by high-level curation. Everyone thinks the AI revolution is just about making pretty pictures more quickly, but there is a deeper, darker shift happening in the way humans think and approach the creative process itself. And that shift starts with a single, simple prompt. The evolution of the brush to the pixel was significant, but the jump from the pixel to the prompt is a change in the very nature of human agency. Soon, the tools you once loved will feel like relics. The future is no longer coming. It is here, and it is changing every single thing we know. To understand the gravity of this transition, we must first trace the technological lineage that led us to this precipice. The journey from the drawing board to the algorithm was a graduated acceleration of power. In the 1990s, the design world lived in the manual era. This was a period defined by raw, painstaking effort that demanded immense patience. Every curve was a struggle of absolute precision. Every vector and every layer was a deliberate manual interaction. The traditional designer was a digital laborer, spending hours to achieve a level of precision we now take for granted. The software was merely a digital version of a physical tool, still entirely dependent on the steady hand of the operator. The 2010s brought the automation era. This was the first time machines began to think alongside the creator. Features like Content Aware Fill allowed software to analyze pixels and make increasingly educated guesses. The software began to recognize patterns. It felt like magic, yet it remained a tool of correction rather than creation. The designer was still the primary architect, using automation to skip tedious tasks. But as we crossed into the 2020s, the paradigm shifted into the generative era. We moved from the machine helping us fix what was already there to the machine proposing what could be. This shift represents a fundamental change in human agency. Design was once about execution, the technical how of bringing an idea to life. Now, the emphasis has pivoted toward curation, the strategic what and why. The technical leap enabling this is the diffusion model. To the layperson, it looks like a computer searching for a picture. But it is far more complex. Imagine an artist who has seen every image ever produced. This artist understands the physics of light and the complex nuances of color theory. When given a prompt, the AI starts with a canvas of pure digital noise. It begins a process of reverse diffusion, removing static and refining pixels until a coherent image emerges. It is like a sculptor carving a statue out of a block of marble. But the marble is made of mathematical probabilities. It is reconstructing art from a latent understanding of visual reality. This technological leap has led to an unprecedented accessibility explosion. Tools like Canva, the democratizer, have introduced Magic Studio, effectively dismantling the gatekeeping of the design profession. This transition represents more than a tool change. It is the democratization of aesthetic power itself. By providing non-designers with the ability to generate professional-grade assets and branding kits through simple text commands, the barrier to entry has been obliterated. The professional skills that the traditional designer spent 20 years honing are now accessible to anyone with an internet connection. However, this democratization triggered a fierce debate. The rise of generative AI was met with immediate backlash from traditionalists who saw it as a threat to the soul of art. The stolen art controversy became a defining conflict as artists realized that these models were trained on datasets containing their intellectual property without consent. This ethical friction shaped the landscape, forcing companies like Adobe to position themselves as safe alternatives by ensuring their models are trained only on licensed imagery. The relationship between creator and tool has been permanently altered. Generative AI acts as the digital brain, capable of infinite iteration, while the human is forced into the role of creative director. The muscle of the hand is being cut out of the equation. This escalation moves beyond simple image generation into the core of commercial design. We are seeing entire layouts and user interfaces being generated in real time. The machine handles the structural integrity, leaving humans to wonder where their unique value lies as the process becomes increasingly conversational. This evolution is rewriting the biological rhythms of creative output, demanding a pace of output once considered physically impossible for a human to maintain. The transition from theoretical potential to industrial implementation was spearheaded by the companies that built the foundations of the digital design world. Adobe, the establishment, responded to the rise of generative engines by weaving AI directly into the fabric of its creative cloud. The introduction of Adobe Firefly and generative fill in Photoshop marked a point of no return for the industry. Tasks that once defined the expertise of the traditional designer, expanding backgrounds or adjusting lighting, were reduced to simple text boxes. What used to take hours of meticulous masking is now achieved in seconds. A designer no longer spends an afternoon searching for a sky replacement. They simply tell the software to imagine one that matches the emotional tone of the scene. This integration changed the psychological weight of the design process. The friction of technical execution began to vanish, leaving the creator to contend with a surplus of creative options. As the landscape shifted, the disruption reached user experience and interface design. Figma AI emerged as a catalyst for a massive transformation in the UI/UX sector. Traditionally, building a functional app interface required a deep understanding of hierarchy, spacing, and psychology. Now, the ability to generate entire application layouts from a single prompt has rewritten the rules. Figma's integration of generative tools allows designers to iterate at an inconceivable speed. Instead of drawing buttons one by one, a designer can command the machine to create a mobile login screen for a luxury travel app. The AI provides the wireframes, typography, and layout in an instant. This shift forces the designer to focus on the strategic logic of the user journey rather than the manual placement of individual pixels. While the corporate giants integrated these features, Midjourney, the disruptor, pushed the boundaries of visualization. With version 6, the pursuit of photorealism reached a staggering height. Midjourney mimics the physical properties of light and camera lenses with such precision that it rivals high-end photography. It understands the bokeh effect and the subtle textures of reality with ease. For photographers and concept artists, this capability is both a marvel and a threat. The barrier between a captured photograph and a generated image is nearly invisible. This level of fidelity means that high-concept visuals for marketing campaigns or film pre-visualization can be created without a physical set or a camera. It is a transformation that touches every corner of digital creation. This reality birthed the phenomenon of prompt engineering. Initially seen as a specialized skill, a new form of digital alchemy, the narrative is already changing. As models become more intuitive, the need for technical prompt strings is fading. The tools are becoming conversational, understanding intent rather than syntax. This suggests that prompt engineering might be a temporary bridge rather than a permanent career path. The industry is moving toward a future where the machine understands the visual vibe of a project without needing a list of modifiers. The evidence is found in the numbers. Adobe stock has seen a massive influx of AI-generated assets. Thousands of synthetic images are uploaded daily, flooding the market and challenging the traditional economics of stock photography. The modern professional now uses a sophisticated multi-model workflow. A project often begins with ChatGPT or Claude to brainstorm concepts, which are fed into Midjourney to generate high-fidelity assets. These are brought into Photoshop, where Adobe's generative fill provides the final industrial-grade polish. This seamless fusion of intelligences works toward a single creative goal. However, this efficiency leads us to a critical crossroads. If anyone can generate a masterpiece in minutes, the scarcity that defined quality evaporates. We are entering an era of infinite visual abundance, but with this speed comes a problem. If everyone can create perfection instantly, does perfection still have intrinsic value? The question is no longer whether we can create, but why we create in a world saturated with the flawless output of the machine. This is the reality of 2024. The immediate consequence of this infinite abundance is a brutal market devaluation. For the professional designer, the math of the industry has been fundamentally broken. In the past, a custom logo or a brand identity package represented weeks of research, sketching, and refinement, justifying a price tag of several hundred or even thousands of dollars. Today, clients have witnessed the speed of the machine. They see a tool that generates 50 variations in the time it takes to brew a cup of coffee. This has sparked a race to the bottom in freelance marketplaces. When a small business owner can use a generative engine to produce a brand kit for the price of a monthly subscription, the perceived value of human labor plummets. The industry is no longer just competing on quality, it is competing against the marginal cost of a server's electricity. This creates a precarious landscape where veteran designers are forced to justify their fees against a phantom competitor that never sleeps and charges nothing for its time. While veterans feel the squeeze, the most devastating impact is felt by the next generation. Traditionally, the design industry operated on a system of apprenticeship. Junior designers were hired for grunt work, performing tasks like image resizing. This labor served as the training ground for mastery. Now, generative AI performs these tasks with surgical precision. The entry-level jobs that once served as the gateway are vanishing. This creates a structural vacuum in the creative pipeline. Without the opportunity to learn by doing the boring work, we face a future where there is no middle ground. We have the AI augmented masters at the top and a generation at the bottom who lack a ladder to climb. The grunt work was not just labor, it was education, and its automation is effectively closing the school doors for those entering the field in 2024. Beyond economics, a subtle creative rot has begun. This is the homogenization of design, known as the AI aesthetic, because models are trained on existing datasets. They favor the mathematical average of what looks good. The result is a flood of visuals that possess a hyper-real perfection, but lack the soul of human imperfection. The happy accidents that occur when a physical brush slips, or a human mind misinterprets a brief are being ironed out by algorithms seeking optimization. We see a world where every startup has the same interface, and every film poster uses the same lighting curves. The loss of quirk is the price of efficiency. When design is dictated by statistical probability, it ceases to challenge the viewer and blends into digital noise. It is a world of perfect, forgettable beauty. However, for those who embrace the shift, the tenfold designer is a reality. A single professional, empowered by generative tools, can manage the output of an entire agency. They are no longer creators but conductors. Yet, this power comes with a heavy psychological toll. A profound sense of imposter syndrome is spreading. Designers Designers feel like glorified button pushers, questioning if the work is truly theirs. When most of an image is hallucinated by a server, the pride of authorship erodes. Consider a marketing firm that replaced its junior staff with AI. Initially, output was staggering, 10 times the assets at half the cost. But within months, their client brands lost their distinct identity. The brands looked like clones because the AI drew from the same pool of inspiration. The quest for speed had inadvertently killed the brand's connection to the consumer. This rapid-fire transition shows that while the machine creates assets, it does not create meaning. The workflow has been revolutionized, but the human heart of the message has become an endangered species in the era of high-speed generation. The before AI timeline, once measured in weeks of thoughtful iteration, has collapsed into a post-AI reality of minutes. This acceleration leaves little room for reflection. The professional now faces a world where they must run faster just to stand still, navigating this new reality. The great divide in the design world is no longer about which software you use, but how you perceive the nature of creation itself. On one side stands the optimist, who views generative AI as the ultimate co-pilot. In this vision, the professional designer is finally liberated from the manual labor of clicking and dragging pixels. By offloading repetitive tasks to the digital brain, the human ascends to a higher plane of creative existence. Design becomes less about the mechanics of how and entirely about the strategic why. The optimist argues that when the barrier to execution is zero, only the strength of the concept and the depth of storytelling matter. It is a return to pure ideation, where a designer's value is measured by their taste, rather than their proficiency with a specific digital tool. However, looking across the chasm, the realist sees a far more ominous horizon. They point to the dead internet theory, a prediction where the digital landscape becomes entirely populated by synthetic content. In this future, AI generates images to satisfy search algorithms, and other models are trained on that same synthetic data, creating a feedback loop of mediocrity. Human-made creativity becomes a needle in a haystack of algorithmic echoes. The pessimist fears that we are trading our unique cultural heritage for a buffet of high-gloss, meaningless visuals. If every piece of art is a statistical average of what already exists, true innovation becomes impossible. We find ourselves trapped in a stylistic loop, unable to break free from patterns the machine has identified as safe. The loss of originality is a cultural crisis that threatens our visual language. This divide isn't just philosophical, it has manifested as a high-stakes legal battlefield. The struggle over copyright is the defining conflict of the generative era. Major lawsuits such as Getty Images versus Stability AI are testing the boundaries of fair use in a way the law was never designed to handle. The core of the argument is whether a machine can learn from copyrighted data without compensation, or if the training is industrial scale theft. The outcome will dictate the future of digital ownership. If the courts rule that AI training requires explicit permission, the industry may see a massive contraction. If they rule in favor of developers, the traditional concept of an original work may vanish forever. Designers are caught in the middle, watching their own portfolios train their eventual replacements in an unregulated market. As a reaction, a new market is emerging, the rise of artisanal design. Just as the Industrial Revolution led to a premium on handcrafted furniture, we are seeing the birth of the human-made badge. In a world of infinite visuals, imperfection becomes a luxury. Brands are beginning to market their lack of AI involvement as a sign of authenticity. This no AI use certification is becoming a luxury status symbol, akin to organic labels in the food industry. It appeals to a growing consumer segment that craves the touch of a human hand and the happy accidents that a computer would otherwise correct. For the professional designer, this offers a survival path, pivoting toward high-end, bespoke artistry that celebrates the friction of human thought and the uniqueness of manual execution. Yet, a darker struggle persists regarding representation and ethics. AI models reflect the biases present in the massive datasets they consume. When prompted for a CEO, the machine often defaults to specific stereotypes, perpetuating historical imbalances. The struggle to make these tools fair remains a significant hurdle for the disruptors. Designers must now act as ethical gatekeepers, scrutinizing output to ensure they aren't spreading algorithmic prejudice. We are teaching the machine to be us, but in doing so, we confront the uglier parts of our own consciousness. The tension is reaching its peak. We have spent years feeding the machine our best ideas and history. Now, as the machine begins to produce work indistinguishable from our own, a haunting question remains. What happens when the student no longer needs the teacher? We are standing on the edge of a world where creation is no longer a human monopoly, waiting for the final shift. The expansion of generative power does not stop at the edges of a static frame. In 2024, the horizon is shifting toward motion and the structural depth of three-dimensional space. We are entering the era of generative video and environments, spearheaded by disruptors like Sora and Runway. These tools are doing for cinematography what Midjourney did for photography. The professional designer, once secure in the specialized complexity of motion graphics, now watches as algorithms synthesize cinematic sequences from simple sentences. This represents a fundamental change in the physics of digital creation, where the distance between a concept and a moving reality is measured in seconds. It is a world where an entire film set exists within a prompt, and the laws of physics are merely suggestions to an algorithm. As these capabilities mature, we witness the death of the tool in its traditional sense. For 30 years, a designer's career was built on the mastery of specific software interfaces. Knowing the keyboard shortcuts of Photoshop was the price of admission. Today, these platforms are evolving from passive tools into conversational entities. The establishment represented by Adobe is no longer just providing a digital brush. They are providing a cognitive partner that anticipates intent. We are moving toward a future where designers will no longer navigate complex menus, but will instead explain visions to an intelligent agent. This agent handles the execution and technical troubleshooting. The barrier between the human mind and manifestation is thinning. When software understands the why behind a design, the manual skill of how becomes a legacy artifact. Survival in this environment requires a radical identity pivot. Longevity in the generative era requires mastering the AI before the workflow is fully automated. This survival strategy is rooted in 3 pillars. First, designers must transition from executors to strategists, acting as the bridge between business objectives and storytelling. Second, they must treat the digital brain as a sophisticated co-pilot, developing expertise in prompt architecture and the curation of algorithmic output. Third is the focus on human connection. While code can mimic a visual style, it cannot replicate the nuance of human emotion or the weight of cultural context. The machine lacks the soul to understand why a specific choice might evoke a memory in a human heart. That connection remains the exclusive domain of the human creator. The final prediction is the inevitable merger of professional roles. The boundaries separating designers and product managers are dissolving. We are approaching a reality where the role of the designer is synonymous with that of a creative director. The technical proficiency of drawing a curve is being replaced by the demand for systems thinking. In this landscape, the creative process is redefined as an act of high-stakes decision-making. Professional value will no longer be measured by hours spent at a desk, but by the quality of one's judgment. The machine can generate 1,000 variations in the blink of an eye, but it lacks the wisdom to know which one will define a brand's legacy. The human designer must become the filter, ensuring the machine's infinite output aligns with a distinct, meaningful vision. In a world of instant visuals, will you be the person who merely presses the button, or the person who knows why the button needs to be pressed? The democratization of taste means the barrier to entry has vanished, but the barrier to excellence has moved higher. Creative power is shifting from those who manipulate pixels to those who architect meaning. As we conclude this investigation, the tension between the human hand and the machine's mind remains the most compelling story of our time. It is a transition fraught with risk, yet bursting with potential. Tell us in the comments, is AI an assistant or a replacement? Your perspective will define the next decade of this craft. Ultimately, the resilience of human creativity is the only constant in this shifting equation. The tools have changed, and the digital brain is now a permanent fixture in the studio. However, the fundamental drive to connect through visual language remains untouched by code. Whether generative AI is an assistant or a replacement will be answered by how we integrate these engines into our lives. As we stand at this final threshold, the spark of vision belongs to those who look beyond the data. The future is not just about what the machine can do, but about what the human spirit refuses to let go of. The brush changed, the canvas changed, but the need to tell a story remains the same.